Welcome to another episode of Rebel Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Katie.
I'm your other host, Michelle. Welcome back.
And we have a surprise today. Well, at least a surprise for me. Michelle has something she wants to talk about. And so the whole shtick here is that she will present her ideas, concepts, arguments, whatever, and I will react in real time and we will go from there. Two therapists shooting the breeze.
Yeah.
Talking about pop culture. Take it away, Michelle.
So I want to talk about Silo Season 3, Episode 1. Spoilers for all of the seasons of Silo and the first episode of Season 3. Katie's never seen any of it. So
I have not.
the basic premise is they're stuck in this silo under the ground. They don't know why. There's definitely some kind of post-apocalyptic thing that has happened. There's a lot of rules, there's a lot of dogma, a lot of drama. The main character, Juliette, essentially has left the silo, discovered there's another one, come back, got burned badly on the way in, and is having trouble remembering what happened.
Right.
And you find out as the episode goes on that they've been drugging her in order to induce this memory loss because they don't want her to remember that she went to another silo. There's high stakes and reasons why, they're not just evil. Essentially, it's too much to explain why all of it.
Sure.
The context is Juliette does not remember, and this person is trying to keep her from not remembering. And the scene I was talking about is her coming into the cafeteria. They have a screen of the outside world, which is desolate. And that's where she remembers sort of coming in from, right? So there she starts with a question. She's thinking about what happened, how she got in, and she's thinking how did I get back into the silo? I would have had to have a tool because you guys didn't open the door. So she's thinking she's an engineer, whatever. She has a pretty curious mind. And so she's thinking, how did I get in? And then she gets this memory of having a crowbar and prying open the doors. But then she also gets this memory of hitting the helmet so that it opens up so she can breathe, which is kind of something else that's happened. And she's kind of just on the cusp of remembering more. And this other person, Camille, who is trying to make her not remember, comes up and sort of redirects her and says, do you need to see the video again? And they've doctored this video that shows that she went to this little shed and then she came back. This idea of she didn't go to another silo, she went to this little shed, found a suit, and then came back in. So kind of perpetuating the lie, and they backed it up with video footage.
So hold on, fake video footage. The whole thing is fabricated.
Fake. Yeah, it's all fabricated. And they do have reasons, like I said, for wanting to do this. They think they're kind of saving the silo, but Juliette's our main protagonist. We're on her side, or at least I'm on her side. So there's a couple of things I think are interesting to talk about here. There's first of all the idea of memory and identity, how much they're locked together. The idea of curiosity as a personality trait, always striving to ask the question, not feeling like it's good enough to kind of get a simple answer if it doesn't sit right with you. That feels like that's what's kind of provoking her to remember is her own curiosity and tenaciousness. And then also that essentially in relationships, the kind of gaslighting, right? Where it's she has a felt sense in her body of things are not adding up. It's incongruent. Something's off here, right? And the person is saying no, it's not off. Here, let me give you, reasons why. And I think even the physicality of that scene, she physically comes over to her. She says look at me. She's touching her on the arm. There's kind of this kind of active manipulation, right? And telling her what she's remembering is not real, which is obviously profoundly disturbing. So I think there's a few different threads we could talk about. What kind of strikes you about this whole setup that I've given you?
The thing that happened for me from a visceral perspective, because I'm just reacting in real time to what you're telling me, because I didn't know anything about it before. It did make me think of my kid and how he was super into Far Cry 4, which was a video game back in the day, and then they did a series. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I bought him up a cookbook of the Far Cry 4. You're stuck in your bunker and you can't get out because there's been nuclear winter or whatever. Anyway, not important. But what really struck me, the last piece where the person comes over and is physically touching Juliette and gaslighting her and telling her that the felt sense that she has is inaccurate, whatever. What I was struck by more than anything was a sense of almost wanting to vomit, frankly, a sense of feeling nauseated, right? If you are aware of your body's reactions, and a lot of what we do as Gestalt therapists is help people sort of reawaken that sense of body experience that I think we all have as children, but for various reasons we ignore or suppress or whatever else. The tension between what I know in my gut, so to speak, to be true and what you, a trusted person, are telling me, and the fact that those things are in opposition, I think that that tension actually can feel like nausea. Like it can be that aggressive, right? Like a tearing almost between the two of them to the point where you're left feeling sick. That's what I was struck by based on what you were telling me.
I think that makes sense to me. For me, it also feels suffocating. There's something like I feel like a trapped kind of feeling. And I think what you're speaking about, like this sense of like when there's vulnerability in the equation and like a power
Mm-hmm.
imbalance, where it's like Camille does have all of this knowledge and all of these tools, and Juliette is given this drug and she doesn't even know she's being given it and she doesn't remember. And, she's at a huge disadvantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's asking questions, right, that don't have an easy answer, that are not sitting well with her, and someone's trying to give her an easy answer and like comfort her, right? Like trying to be in a comforting way.
Mm-hmm.
And like, why do people trust authority or like people close to them when their feeling is off, right? And it's like that's a pretty layered, heavy question, but like the sense of being able to trust your own feeling and to go with it. And my sense is as the season goes on, like that underlying feeling is going to erupt over into something, right? Where she'll discover something. You're suppressing something that can't be suppressed.
Yes, I agree with that. Although I think I have some suggested answers for the questions that you asked. So,
Yeah.
one, I think that this sense of knowing what is real and true is something that we are born with, frankly. I think about interacting with 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds when they throw their tantrums. Like, they're pretty sure they know how they feel, right? Like there's no real confusion, there's no mitigation, there's no sort of hedging your bets, there's no checking for validation. That comes later. Absolutely it does, depending on your environment and your circumstances. But at 2 years old or 3 years old and you're throwing tantrums, you know exactly how you feel. So this idea that we know what feels right to us is a pretty human experience. And then along the way, we learn how to do all the other things I mentioned. We learn how to suppress it. We learn how to soften it or push it away or completely deny it, which is sort of an internal betrayal, I think. And my reasoning for this, you asked, like, why do people do that? I think we do it for safety, right? So if you're a child, you have to adjust to whatever the environment is that you're growing up in, and that includes how your parents are with you, what they say is true, all the rest of it. So we learn pretty early on, I think, without kind of a healthy supportive environment, and a lot of us don't grow up in so-called perfect environments. Not that that's a thing anyway, but whatever. The limitations of being humans as parents to their children, I think we learn to adjust what we think is true. No, we translate what we feel is true into this like heady concept of what we think is true according to what is allowed to be true by the adults or the caregivers or whatever in our environment. And I think that's where the internal betrayal happens. And I think it is, like I said, for that sense of safety or protection or survival.
Yeah, well, as you're saying that, yes, I agree that the safety element and also like the relational safety, right? Like this
Mm-hmm.
feeling like that if I stick up for how
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually feeling, there'll be a rupture in this relationship. And
Yeah,
obviously when you're young, you, like you said, the
can't
survivalistic,
afford
but you can't survive, right? So it's like I'm gonna just like
that.
suppress this feeling or tell myself that it's not real and go along with the person because that's how you survive. But then obviously as you get older and you learn that actually you can survive, like you no longer actually are dependent on a parent in the same way. But we often act in that safety loop in relationships, right? Like that fear of if somebody leaves, I'm gonna die. Like that really deep felt sense of like that is true. Because it was true at one point, it's just no longer true.
I think that's what people are talking about when they use the common vernacular of like abandonment issues. I think that's what that is, right? If you leave me, I will die. And to your point, as a child abandoned by their parents, you would die, actually, or certainly it feels true, right? It kind of is true.
Yeah.
The other flip, though, of what you're talking about, I think what came up for me is the importance of trust and honesty in relationships and the relationship between those two things. So, what I mean, when I really heard you, it was the idea of like parents have so much power over their children because parents, specifically parents, adults generally, whatever, like whatever we say, kids tend to believe. And so you have to be really careful, I think, about what you say to children, knowing that you have this inordinate amount of power. But then as you fast forward and you talk about just sort of relationships, generally speaking, if I trust you, you have a lot of power over me. If I
Mhm.
trust you and I think that you're talking to me in good faith because over time you've shown yourself to be a trustworthy person, you could say almost anything. And if I really trust you, I'm going to start questioning myself, which seems to be sort of like a human experience. Because as a an introspective person who wants to learn and grow as a human being, if you as somebody that I love and trust, tell me something that really does not align with my concept of myself, I'm going to take at least a moment to step back and go, oh shit, okay, wow, that never occurred to me. I should probably give that a little bit of space. Right. And I just like that to me is why something like gaslighting in a relationship is just reprehensible because you're abusing and betraying the like I can't even think of the right words, but like the fundamental sense of trust that somebody has in you. And that feels, I don't know, particularly nefarious somehow. Does that resonate?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, you're basically like, when you do trust someone, it's like you're giving them the benefit of the doubt all the time, right? So even if
Yeah.
they say something that you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense or that doesn't sit right, you're like, well, but it's them. I at least have to consider this.
That's
And
Michelle.
it's
She doesn't lie to me. It must be true. Right?
right. And so gaslighting that's done in a manipulating, nefarious way, it's so insidious and it essentially erodes the relationship whether you know it or not, right?
Yeah.
Because I think at a certain point there's like you can no longer go with the belief of that person. Like you've had enough contrary evidence or enough felt sense of just being like, you know, no, right? And that's like such a huge rupture. I don't know how you come back from that.
So I would make the distinction that if somebody lies to you to save face or they make a mistake. There's a distinction, I think, between making a mistake with somebody, and we all do that in relationship, right? Even if we are well intended, we'll still make mistakes. That's fine. I think it's much easier to repair trust, although it takes time and come back from that, as opposed to something like gaslighting, which is technically an abusive strategy, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure my opinion as a therapist, but as a human as well, is I don't know that you can come back from that actually. There's a particular level of malice associated, I think, with gaslighting, where it's like, I know I'm doing this to you to further my aim, whatever it happens to be. Maybe it's to try to get away with something, or I don't know, I'm just kind of a psychopath and I want to like wind you up. I don't know, whatever. It happens in relationships. I do think there's a distinction between bad behavior and abusive behavior in relationships. And I think bad behavior, as long as everybody learns from this, and if I have failed you in our relationship, if I have fumbled with you, if I've made mistakes with you, I can make amends, I can take responsibility for my behavior, and we can potentially, assuming that you're open to it, we can move on, right? And rebuild the relationship, rebuild the trust. But I think if there's been a particular intention of malice or harm, I don't know. For me personally, as an individual, I have no interest in continuing with somebody who has shown themselves to be harmful to me. As a
Yeah.
therapist, it depends. I withhold my beliefs or my feelings about that, and I really just sort of adjust to whatever the client is presenting. I don't think it's impossible to come back from that. I think it then becomes an issue of like, how willing am I to put the work in? And for me, the line is, did you do it on purpose or did you just fuck up? Because if you just fucked up, given the relationship that we had before and how important that may or may not be to me, maybe it's worth my time to try to repair that with you. If not, maybe not.
Yeah, because I think like it's different when you lie to someone out of maybe your own like misplaced sense of self-protection or something, right? Like you're knowingly lying, but you're doing it in a way that feels like, oh God, like whatever, I have to do this or whatever your internal reasoning is, as opposed to like I'm no knowingly doing this and I have no kind of conflict about it whatsoever, right? Like I just want you to behave in a particular way. And so this is the way I'm going to get it done, right? Like that kind of controlling, abusive behavior. And like I said, I think to try to repair, you do have to have that distinction with the person, right? And
Well, yeah, because for repair, if I'm the person who's done the harm, I don't think repair is possible unless I'm able to say to you, you know what? Yeah, I really fucked that up. I'm sorry. I take responsibility for the harm that I caused you. And in most abusive situations, that doesn't happen. right? The
Yeah.
abuser is not willing to take responsibility for the harm that they have caused. So, I mean, to me, that's the
They
distinction.
might not even see it as harm, which is what's really shocking, right? Like I don't
Yep,
know, right? 'Cause it's like they
you're
might
not
not even
wrong.
frame it that way, right? They think like that's how you are in relationships, which is sad.
And get the hell out. In my personal
Yeah.
feeling. Yeah.
I mean, like, so, I mean, bringing it back to the show, right? It's like,
Yes.
can you ever see Juliette trusting Camille again? Because let's say
No.
there's another situation down the road, and she knows she had done this to her before, and she like touches her on the arm and she says, like, look at me.
Uh,
You know what I mean? You would just be like,
Terrible.
no, no thanks.
So as a therapist, I would ask Juliette, like, have you addressed this? Have you shared your feelings? Assuming Juliette now knows that there's been this massive betrayal, right? And how did Camille respond to you? How did Camille take responsibility for her actions? Did she take responsibility for her actions? Is she willing to meet you, Juliette, in the middle here and like work together to repair? Has she taken full responsibility for the harm that she's caused? And if not,
Yeah, it's not safe to be around that person.
and I think that's a great point, right? So, I mean, it's not necessarily that I would tell somebody to leave that relationship, even though in my own personal feeling, it would be like, get the hell out. Like, I don't understand how that's useful. But at the same time, everybody has different reasons for being in relationships. And so, as a therapist, it's not about telling people to leave or stay ever, right? It is about, okay, so you've chosen to stay, fair enough. How can we then come up with a kind of safety plan to keep you as safe as possible, given a relationship that is not entirely safe to you, right? That is not entirely supported. Yeah?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I was going to say too, and then there's the level of having to kind of reestablish trust with yourself, right? Like listening to that voice and almost like making an internal repair, right? Taking that voice seriously. And so that's always what I wish for everybody, right? Is like to take it seriously, believe yourself. That doesn't mean you're always right, but believe yourself about your own feeling, right? And that's the ground of support. That's the ground of internal support is like believing and caring how you feel. All right, let's leave it there. You don't know any of her
That's
reasons yet, but yes, I also hate
no.
her.
I don't know anything else. I don't know if it's a real thing or wrong thing or the appropriate response, whatever. But based on the tiny little snapshot, I'm like, Juliet, get the hell out of there. But that's just my personal feeling. If Juliet was my client, I would not be quite as forthcoming. I would be like, you do what is appropriate to you. Let me help you keep you safe.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. That's how I would be. I would be like, no, this is not a good situation. Get out of there.
However, not my job or your job to give people
No,
advice. It's more to meet them where they are and support them where they are to keep themselves as safe as possible and to operate it with as much autonomy as they can. Yeah?
yeah, yeah, and I think that that takes being connected to yourself.
Agreed. Well,
All
here
right.
you are again introducing me to another piece of culture. You've got your thumb on the pulse of, or finger on the pulse, whatever, of the culture, and I love that. So, for anybody else who's made it this far, please like and subscribe. It's very helpful to us if you'd like to do that. And as before, if there are any particular cultural touch points that you would like us to explore, let us know. We will do that.
And if you do have opinions on this episode or this scene, I would love to
Anything
hear
else?
from you. What you think? Anything we left out, you know?
Let us know. Exactly. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.